One simply cannot understand certain aspects of world politics without comparing it with your wired earphones tied in a frustratingly convoluted knot. Yeah, in the Middle East too, there is such a terrible knot, and it shifts the dynamics constantly and breaks all the rules of traditional international relations and diplomacy. But I'll try to break it down to you before we start. You see, the Nagorno-Karabakh war was a geopolitical eye-opener for the world, especially for the Middle East and the South Caucasus region. An enclave within Turkic Azerbaijan has an Armenian majority which has been wanting to secede. It had Armenia's full support, and since Armenia has Russia's full support, it was expected to have Russia's full support. But Russia had other priorities in mind. But what's so interesting is that the mostly Christian Armenia also has Iran's support against the Muslim Azerbaijan. And why is that? Because Iran shares a border with Azerbaijan and has an Azeri minority which seeks support from Azerbaijan to secede from Iran. So Azerbaijan became an enemy, and since enemies of enemies are friends, Iran supports Armenia. On the other hand, Azerbaijan has Turkey's complete support, but most interestingly, it also has Turkey's enemy, Israel's complete support. And why is that? Because, well, Israel needs Azerbaijan to remind Iran that it can snatch territories and cause trouble within the Persian nation whenever it wants. So, Turkey and Israel are sworn enemies and have been competing in Azerbaijan. But again, there is another twist. The new twist in the story is that Turkey wants to make nice with Israel. Urgently, immediately. So what happened now? Hi, and welcome to TFI Global, the foreign affairs and geopolitical analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I'm your host Shubhangi, and in this video I will tell you about Turkey's new overtures to its enemy Israel and how it is all about Azerbaijan. Let's begin. Israel has been encircling Iran. In fact, it is encircling Iran with such finesse that other countries are beginning to worry about their fortunes. The tide in the Arab world is fast changing. Support for Israel is growing, and the Biden administration is pushing for more Gulf states to normalize ties with the Jewish nation. The Arab world itself is realizing the endlessness of conflicts in the Middle East and is as such looking to establish a region which is peaceful. Iran remains a top priority for the Arab states, and it continues to threaten regional stability. The goal is to bring as many countries as possible under one umbrella to counter Iran, and Israel is leading this effort with the support of Saudi Arabia and the UAE. So, Turkey, under its wannabe Khalifa Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, is now looking to be on the right side of history. After 10 years of extremely strained bilateral ties between Israel and Turkey, the world was surprised recently as the Turkish president called his new counterpart in Israel. In a long call on Monday, Erdoğan congratulated Herzog on being sworn into his new role as Israel's president last week and noted the importance of relations between the two countries for the sake of regional stability. The Turkish president said there was strong potential for cooperation between the two countries in fields including energy, tourism, and technology. A statement put out by the Turkish presidency said, pointing out that the bilateral trade volume increased despite the pandemic, President Erdoğan said that it was of mutual interest to benefit from that potential. An Israeli readout of the important call stressed the great importance of maintaining contact and ongoing dialogue despite the differences of opinion, with the goal of making positive steps towards a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which will also contribute to the improvement of Israeli-Turkish relations. From calling Israel a terror state to now dialing its new president and seeking enhanced mutually beneficial ties, Turkey's Erdoğan has come a long way. Of course, he does not dare to speak to the Prime Minister of Israel just yet. But at the core of Turkey's push for better ties with Israel is the Jewish nation's decision to get heavily involved in Azerbaijan with the aim of neutralizing Iran. In the effort, Turkey's ties with Azerbaijan can very well suffer collateral damage, and Ankara does not want to lose Baku to Israel. Turkey, for its own geopolitical goals, is committed to an alliance with Azerbaijan, which is now being threatened by the growing interest and involvement of Israel in the country. As a matter of fact, Azerbaijan won the 44-day Nagorno-Karabakh war solely with the support of Turkish UAVs and drones, which proved to be a game-changer during the conflict. Israel's shrewd diplomacy, however, is threatening ties between Ankara and Baku. Yet Israel's moves to befriend Azerbaijan have everything to do with Iran, and Turkey knows this. Therefore, Erdoğan is trying to find a way in which both Israel and Turkey can benefit as Azerbaijan's allies. Azerbaijan has repeatedly expressed dissatisfaction with Iran's support for some Islamist groups in the country, which Tehran has sought to use as leverage over Baku, as well as to offset what it fears is Baku's influence over the large ethnic Azeri minority living in Iran, which Tehran sees as secessionists. Nonetheless, Iran is trying to placate Azerbaijan since it is aware of Israeli efforts to win over the Turkish ally. On its part, Israel has expressed a desire to help Azerbaijan rebuild its border areas with Iran. Interestingly, it has also asked Azerbaijan to use the Israeli tactic of building kibbutzim or settlements in the area, indicating that this was the way Israel was created. The same was communicated to Azerbaijan by Israeli Communications Minister Ayub Kara, who was visiting the Iran-Azerbaijan border for unspecified reasons. The Israeli minister told Azerbaijan, "We should send over Israeli companies to help clear off the landmines," adding, "We can offer the Azerbaijanis the right technology to rebuild the area." In a nutshell, Israel is very much interested in promoting secessionist activities within Iran. In addition, Azerbaijan is currently the largest supplier of energy to Israel. The volume of bilateral trade between the two countries reached $287.8 million in the first 5 months of 2021. In January, Azerbaijan expressed its willingness to involve Israel in the restoration of the country's newly liberated territories. Turkey has, of late, been laying an emphasis on mending its ties with Arab states. It has been trying to normalize ties with Egypt, while also sending the feelers to Saudi Arabia. Ankara realizes that its peace efforts will necessarily have to include Israel despite all the hate. Erdoğan, it seems, has concluded that if he wants to push back against Iran, he will need the help of Israel.